Welcome to our lesson on writing measurable and effective goals and objectives. This lesson includes watching this video and then downloading and reviewing the 4 attachments to this lesson that are provided in the lesson media section of the lesson. In this section, you'll find 2 guidebooks for writing goals. You'll find an article on strategies for achieving goals. And then finally, you'll find a goal-setting worksheet. Additionally, there is a PDF copy of the PowerPoint slides of this lesson that you can download and print for your convenience. When you have completed watching the video and you are comfortable with all of the material and the attachments, you are required to complete the attached quiz with a passing score of at least 70% in order to complete this lesson. As I was working on this lesson, I ran across this quote and I really enjoyed it. The trouble with not having a goal is that you can spend your whole life running up and down the field and never score. How I understood that is that goals provide direction in our lives. They are our roadmap. They help us to know when we are there, wherever there is. I'm reminded of the famous quote, one of the famous quotes from Yogi Berra. If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. Let's start with the question, where do goals for our consumers come from? The goal planning process and the eventual service plan are the endpoint of the assessment planning process. This process starts with our strength-based assessment, which is discussed in another lesson. It continues with an assessment of the consumer's strengths, needs, abilities, and preferences. With all of this information, we move forward to the service plan. Oops, I forgot one of the items that's on the slide. Goals come from our clients. A goal is not a goal unless it comes from the client. If your service plan is limited to things like the client will regularly attend psychiatric appointments, or attend the day treatment program 3 times a week, or take their medications as prescribed, you don't have a service plan. Let me say that again. If all you do is describe the services for the person, that is not a service plan. Effective goals come from our clients. They are things that are important to the clients. They are things that will make a difference in our clients' lives. The client service plan might include things like seeing the psychiatrist or attending a program or taking medications. But these must be steps for the client in achieving something meaningful and important in their lives. One model of goal plan development starts with a description of the person's ideal future. Now, this is not what do you want to be when you grow up. This process should be an exploration of the person's desired end state. We might get at that with a question like, if everything worked out just the way you want it, what would your life look like? What would be different in your life? This ideal future should describe something meaningful in the person's life. It should describe a significant change for the person. Far too many of us are so focused on what we're doing right now that we forget sometimes to look up toward the horizon to see where we're going. I believe that one of the most important questions that we will ever ask ourselves or our consumers is, what do you want out of your life? Henry David Thoreau, in his famous book, Walden, wrote, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. This troubled me for many years, as I did not want it to be true. But I think I finally understand what he meant. Most of us, or at least far too many of us, wake up, eat breakfast, go to work, come home, eat dinner, watch a little TV, and go to bed. We wake up again tomorrow and do the same thing, over and over and over. The answer, I believe, to this desperation is having a clear vision of what we want from our life, what our ideal future is. Since I started with a quote from Thoreau, I'll end this slide with another quote from Thoreau. Later on in Walden, he wrote, "If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected." Once we have an understanding of the person's ideal future, we can begin the process of discovering and defining goals. This process is realistically a discussion about what the person believes that he or she needs to do or could do to move in the direction of his or her ideal future. Questions like, where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to concentrate on at this time? Can get to some of this information. In defining goals, what we want to get to is what does this person want to work on right now that moves him or her toward the ideal future? What is this person willing to commit to make his or her life more like he or she wants it to be? Charlie Curry, the former administrator for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, tells this story about what our consumers' goals really are. When he was the Deputy Director of Mental Health Services in the state of Pennsylvania, he traveled all over the state. And where he and when he could during his travels, instead of staying in a hotel, he liked to stay in the administrator house at the state mental hospitals. And when he would stay there, he didn't just hole up in the house. He tells the story that he'd like to go out into the units at the state hospital and talk with the people who were there on the units. And when he would talk with the people, he would ask them, what did they want? Now, what he expected them to talk about were all of the services that they wanted to be provided for them by the mental health system. Instead, and he's hysterical when he tells this, he said over and over and over what he learned, that the people were consistent in telling him what they wanted was a job, a place to stay, and a date on the weekends. And so when we think about writing our service plans about all of the services that we think that this individual needs, what we need to remember is likely what they want is something meaningful to do that they can do every day, a place that they can call home that's secure and is safe, and a relationship in their life that is meaningful to them. One of the activities that I usually do when I conduct trainings on treatment or service planning is to ask the group how they look at the plan and the process of completing the plan. So I'm going to ask you, how do you look at the process of developing a service plan and the plan itself? Now, I know you can't answer me, or actually you can answer me, I just can't hear you. But I do want you to answer that question for yourself. Almost universally, when I ask this question in live trainings, the majority of answers sound something like this. It's one of the forms that the regulations require that I do, and they break my heart. Or maybe they give me hope that maybe the training can help them see goal planning in a different way. I see goal planning as a wonderful opportunity to really understand what is important to this person who is in front of me. I see the plan as a living, breathing document that will serve as the guide for everything that we do. We can use it to tell when we are on or off track. We can use it to know when we need to change tracks. The process of goal planning done correctly is an enormous benefit to the person with whom we are working. The process can start to build hope for this person in two ways. First, with the person actually thinking about what they want their life to be like, they can begin to believe that maybe their life can be different. Second, the plan helps build hope as the person works on and accomplishes things in the plan. There's an old saying that nothing succeeds like success. The goal plan is also a wonderful tool to help us stay focused. When the plan is meaningful to the client, then we can stay focused on working on things that are important to them. We never have to struggle for figuring out what we're going to talk about or what we're going to do, because the service plan is our guide, and the service plan is about important things, valuable things to the person that we're working with. The plan also establishes a commitment in the working relationship. The plan should contain things that the person has made a commitment to do. And our implied commitment to that person is that we will work with them on those identified goals. Finally, an effective plan allows the consumer to evaluate his or her steps toward the goal. Some of the steps will be successful, and some will not. Sometimes challenges and setbacks will get in the way of accomplishing a goal, but this is not a bad thing. It's an important learning experience to know what does work and what does not. One common complaint by mental health and substance abuse staff members is that our consumers don't work on and complete their treatment or service plan goals. Before I get into why this might be the case, let me ask you, have you ever set a goal for yourself that you didn't meet? If so, why didn't you complete the goal? Most of us have had the experience of setting goals and not meeting them, even if it was as simple as a New Year's resolution. And the most common reason that we have for not meeting the goal is that it's just not that important to us, or I wasn't willing to do what I would need to do to meet the goal. So the behavior of setting and not meeting goals is probably a universal phenomenon, not just specific to our clients. So let's take a look at some of the reasons that our clients may not meet their goals. First, the goal, as is written, is not the consumer's goals. Very frequently in the mental health and substance abuse field, workers will define the goals for the treatment or the intervention or whatever the service is. And if the goal is not the individual's goal, if it's not important to them, they will not work on it. Second, resources that are needed to complete the goal are not available. For example, if a person needs to travel For example, they've set the goal of attending school, but they don't have a vehicle. If they need resources for travel, if they do not have that resource available, they are not going to be able to complete the goal. Third, lacks the skill needed to complete the goal. Sometimes we wish we set a goal that we really don't have the skills that we need to complete the goal. So, for example, if I said I was going to translate the Iliad from its original Greek into English, I don't have the skill to translate Greek into English, even though I have taken an entire year of ancient Greek. Our clients may have limited skills. There may be deficits in their abilities. We need to make sure that they have the abilities and the skills that they need to complete the goals that they set. Next, fear of failure or fear of success. There is I would call it a pandemic of loss of hope with substance abuse and mental health clients, that they have failed so many times that they fear failing again and what it will mean to them that they're going to fail again. Additionally, there's some level of fear of success, that if I do this, I might lose something else in my life. If I get a job, I might lose my benefits. Next, sometimes we set too many goals at one time. In spite of the fact that we like to think that we're able to multitask, we really can only work on one thing at a time. There may be a couple of things that are important to the person, but if we set more than just a couple of goals for the individual, they're not going to meet the goals because they become distracted. Next, there's no positive reinforcement or reward. If I do not get some benefit for my effort, for my work, I will not continue that effort or the work. If I didn't get a paycheck, I wouldn't come to work every day. The paycheck is my reinforcement for the behavior of coming to work. We need to set up inherent rewards and reinforcements when we do a service plan. I used to tell the people that I worked with, break your arm patting yourself on the back when you do what you've said that you wanted to do. Next, life circumstances change for people, and sometimes the goals that were important to us a couple of months ago are no longer important to us. It is why the service plan needs to be a living, breathing instrument so that when life circumstances change, we're able to change the goals to the things that are desirable for the people we work with. Next, lack of support from others, or the goal requires others' actions. We really do want to focus our goals on things that are within the control of the individual that we're working with, because requiring others to do something to meet a goal is often a fruitless exercise. Sometimes individuals need support and encouragement from other individuals, and so if they don't have that support, they may not work on their goals. And so then the goal becomes, what do you need to do to get the support that you need to work on your goals? And finally, the goal has not been broken down into manageable steps. We're going to talk a little bit later about objectives. These are the manageable steps toward meeting a goal, but whenever I talk about breaking it down into manageable steps, I use the old joke, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer to that is one bite at a time. There are a number of other factors that may affect goal achievement. First is the level of the person's interest in the goal. Now, as I've described the goal setting process, I've used the term important to the individual. And so things that are important to the person, they should have a fairly high level of interest. But if we do not do a good job of determining goals that are important, that are significant, then the person may not be interested in the goal. And if they're not interested in the goal, they're simply not going to do it. Next, the level of desire regarding the outcome. The outcome of achieving the goal should be something that the person truly wants, not just wishes for. Wants are things that we have control over, that we desire in our life. And so the goals should be things that the individual truly wants, has a strong desire for the accomplishment of that outcome. Also affecting goal achievement is how much time the individual has. If the person is scheduled from sunup to sundown, the chances are they're not going to have a lot of time to work on something that is new. And so one of the things that we have to make sure when we're working on a service plan is that the person has the time available to work on the plan. Next is the individual's health. Whether it is physical health or mental health complications, health affects our ability to work on new things in our life. Health affects our abilities to work on things that we desire. Health affects our interest in things. So we must accommodate changes in the individual's health if and when they occur. Next is competing priorities. While it may be very, very important to the individual to meet this goal, when that goal comes up against the priority of taking care of their families, that goal is probably going to lose. And all of us have competing priorities in our life. So we really need to understand the priorities in the individual's life and make sure that other priorities do not interfere with a goal that we may set with the individual. And finally, the individual's confidence. If I don't have confidence that I'm going to be able to meet this goal, I'm likely not going to try very hard. If I do have confidence that I'm going to be able to meet this goal, I am likely to try very hard. And so part of what we need to work on with the individuals with whom we work is this concept of self-efficacy, which is I am able to accomplish what I set out to do. And there are many, many individuals that we work with that do not have a strong sense of self-efficacy. And that is one of the things, hopefully, that a goal plan can help work with. Because as the person accomplishes steps, they begin to feel competent and confident that they can meet the goal. In the goal-setting process, we've already talked about the process of discovering the individual's ideal future and working with that individual and discovering current goals that are meaningful and significant in that individual's life. The rest of the process includes setting specific objectives for each goal. Objectives are the action steps. They are the building blocks to reaching the goal. They are the small steps that the individual needs to take to make the giant leap to the accomplishment of the goal. And to continue my metaphor, it is the one bite of the elephant. Next, we need to define who the responsible party is for each of the specific objectives. Now, we do want to write most of our service plans where the specific objectives are the activities of the individual with whom we're working. But occasionally, there will be things on the plan where we are the responsible party. So we want to be perfectly clear in the service plan who is going to do what. And then finally, the final step in the goal setting process is to define the timelines for the accomplishment of these specific objectives, and finally the timeline for the completion of the goal. As we move our discussion from the process of setting goals to defining specific objectives, I ran across this little chart and thought that I would share it with you. Goals are broad. They are intentions. They may be intangible. They may be more abstract. Sometimes goal statements may be difficult to measure. However, when we step down to specific objectives, objectives are narrow. They are very specific. They are precise. They are concrete things, tangible things that we can observe. And finally, objectives need to be measurable. We need to know when it has been done. A widely used acronym for how we write objectives is the acronym SMART. If you want to discover how widely used that is, just go to Google and type in SMART goals. SMART stands for 5 characteristics of an objective, and those are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. We're going to spend some time talking about each of those concepts. The S in the SMART acronym stands for specific. When setting a goal or objective, we want to be very specific about what exactly we want to accomplish. Think about this idea as the mission of the goal. It may not be a detailed list of how we're going to meet the goal, but it should include answers to the popular W questions. Who needs to be involved in the process of achieving the goal? What exactly is it that the individual wishes to accomplish? And when doing objectives, do not be afraid to get very detailed. When? We'll get more specific about this idea under the time-bound section of the SMART goal, but we need to have an idea of the time frame. Where? It may not always be apparent when we're talking about location in terms of goals that we're setting with an individual, but if there is a location or a relevant event, it is important that we identify it. Which determines any related obstacles or requirements. This idea can be beneficial in deciding if the goal is realistic. For example, if your goal is to open a baking business but you've never baked anything before, that might be an addition. That might be an issue. As a result, we may need to refine the specifics of the goal to include learn how to bake in order to open a baking business. And finally, why? What is the reason for the goal? What is the reason for this individual that they have set this goal? When it comes to using this method in working with individuals with whom we work, the answer is likely to be pointed toward their concept of their ideal life. The M in the SMART acronym is measurable. We need to set, especially when dealing with objectives, ideas that in some way are measurable. We need to know how much, how many. How are we going to know when that objective has been accomplished? What kind of measurements are we going to use to determine if the goal has been met? This makes the goal much more tangible because it provides a way of measuring progress. If the goal requires a number of steps, we might call them or consider those steps milestones, and we need to be able to measure when those milestones have been completed as we move closer and closer and closer to the accomplishment of a goal. The A in the SMART acronym is Achievable, and sometimes you will see that A as attainable. This concept focuses on how important the goal is to the individual and what the individual can do to make the goal or objective attainable. In looking at attainable or achievable, it may require developing new skills or changing attitudes. The goal is meant to inspire motivation and not discouragement. So we need to look at how is the individual going to accomplish the goal. Does the individual have the tools or skills needed? If not, what needs to happen so that the individual can obtain the goals? One of the things that we have to consider is how realistic is the goal. Now, the recovery principles that are discussed in another training would indicate that we need to extend our ideas about what is realistic for the individuals that we work with, because individuals who have been diagnosed with serious mental disorders, serious substance use disorders, have gone on in their lives to do fantastic and amazing things, becoming doctors and lawyers and counselors. And so our idea about what is realistic, we may need to extend and expand that. But if I were to say I have set out a goal to play as a player in the Premier League in soccer in England, that's probably not very realistic for me. If you can't tell, I'm not the youngest of men, and I've had surgery on both my knees. It's probably not very realistic that I'm going to play in the Premier League. And so when an individual has a goal that may not be realistic for them, we want to work with the individual to understand what is it that that goal particularly means to that person. What are they really looking for to accomplish in setting that goal? And we may be able to find a much more realistic goal than the goal as they have set it. And so if I were to say, well, the reason that I want to play in the Premier League is that I want to be in really good shape, that's a very different goal and something that is much more realistic for me. The R in the SMART acronym refers to the goal being relevant. This concept really talks about, is the goal meaningful? Is the objective worthwhile? Is this something that will be significant for this individual? That if they accomplish it, it in fact makes a difference in their life. The other thing we have to consider when talking about relevance is the timing. Is it the right time to set this as a goal or an objective? And finally, when discussing relevance, we need to make sure that it is consistent with the individual's other efforts and their other needs. And so we shape the goal, we shape the objectives to make sure that they are meaningful, worthwhile. We make sure they're being done at the right time, and make sure that they're consistent with the other things that the individual is doing. T is the final part of the SMART acronym, and it stands for time-bound, and in some cases you'll see it as timely. In defining the time for a goal or for an objective, we need to know and define, when will this be done? When does the individual expect to be done with this step? We also need to make sure that we set realistic target dates, not unrealistic target dates. We want the person to experience success. We do not want the person to experience discouragement. And so we need to be very clear with the other things that are going on in the individual's life to consider what a realistic target date for the completion of a step might be. I'm going to end with two of my favorite tests that we need to apply to goals and objectives. When we have completed goals and objectives for the individual that we're working with, we need to do these two tests. The first one is, so what? So at the end of reading each goal or each objectives, we need to ask ourselves and the individual that we're working with, well, so what? So what is a question that gets at whether the goal or objective is meaningful. If the individual says, well, I don't know, then we really haven't written a meaningful goal or objective. And the final test I call the dead man's test. And that is when you read the goal or objective, can a dead person do it? What this really gets at is making sure that the goal and objective describe actions rather than the absence of an action. A dead person can stay sober. A dead person cannot attend meetings. A dead person can stay out of the hospital. A dead person cannot take medication or take a bus or get a job. So we want to make sure that the goals and objectives are stated in actions that the individual is going to take rather than the absence of action. This concludes our training on setting effective goals and objectives. Again, as a reminder, you are asked to download and review the material that is included in the lesson media, and for your convenience, there is a PDF copy of the PowerPoint slides also attached in the lesson media. When you are confident and comfortable with the information that has been provided, you are required to take the attached quiz with a passing score of at least 70% in order to complete this lesson. Good luck.